and say a big hello. Thanks for coming to this second session. I'll get us started by thinking about, just going over what we're talking about today. Um, as opposed to 2 weeks ago when we were talking about things at a more day-to-day level, today's session is looking at annual stock checks and annual reports, what we might want to learn, and a more zoomed out point of view. And what makes a great annual report or impact report? Because we know that that's something that lots of organisations have to write. We're just about to publish ours, and we're going to try and show you a sneak peek of the My Society um, impact report, just as a kind of conversation starter, thinking about what good looks like, and you can tell us if we're getting close or not. Um, and then, as well as that, we're thinking again on that kind of broad out view. If we're collecting this data and we're sharing it as an annual report, which is so often written, what about if we shared more data to be useful in other kind of formats? And so we've got this Youth Data Hub prototype to show you, where Zerino has gathered together lots of different information and tried to display that in a fun and engaging way, but we think it would be even better with more information in. So that's the second half of today's session. We won't be here for longer than an hour, and there is a chance for you to ask questions throughout. Please do put your questions in the chat at any time if you would like to. Hi, Helen from Durham. I was in Durham for the big meet, the Miners Gala, when that was a couple of weekends ago. Uh, wish I was there with you now. Great, let's get going. So, we have a poll for you to start us off, a bit like we did last time. And let me launch that for you, which is just finding out of the people in the room which of these that you currently produce, because that helps us work out what you're currently writing, and then we can, have a go, at seeing how we can make them more helpful. So everybody so far is making trustee reports and funder reports. Yeah, if you've got funders, you've got to report to them. And most people writing annual reports and trustee reports, but not so many people doing internal project reviews. I'll just give that another minute or two. We've got 6 answers, another few seconds. So yeah, let us know what you tend to produce. I know that all of these take some time, and so the kind of aim of today is to make them as helpful as possible and kind of improve the processes around them. Um, Great. I'll just give it another few seconds. I haven't had anyone else answer that. Okay, let me display that for you so you can see. Yes, so not everybody is doing everything, which is interesting. Most people are doing annual reports and funder reports, some trustee reports, and then just one person is doing internal project or program reviews. So yeah, really, really interesting. What we're going to talk about today is how we can make the most of the data that we're already sharing in some of these reports and and be as helpful as possible. Great. So let's go forward then. Um, as we mentioned last week, part of the way that we've designed these sessions is as a result of some interviews that we did. And so we spoke to about 15 different organisations who are all grantees of the YIF project, about data, how they use it, and how it's working for them. And this is the sort of thing that came up and what's kind of guiding our session today. Everybody's collecting quite a lot of information, but doesn't always have the time to step back and do anything with it. Especially when, you're working with young people or other vulnerable people in your communities, and so it's hard to actually do that next step. And that the valuable knowledge often isn't written down anywhere, or if it is, it's kind of separated for all those numbers and facts and figures. And it seems like people don't feel like they're making the most out of the data that they do have. Identifying patterns is hard, and it's even harder to kind of group those together and then communicate them in a way, especially if it feels like, the funders only want to hear the good stuff, and same with your supporters and other people. And so, how do we ask the right questions and communicate what we find out? And yeah, what we're sort of looking at today is finding the right cadence for asking these questions and what to do with it. And so, Some of the questions that we might want to talk about are really important to us, but would be overwhelming and impossible to deal with if we looked at them too often. And so last time we talked about day to day, and then there may be other things that we want to look at monthly or quarterly. And so reviews, we talked a bit about that last time. But this time we're talking more about annually. And so things that only become kind of visible when you take that really like zoomed out kind of look. And I think different learning does happen at these kind of different speeds. So yeah, what's the kind of vision that we have at this annual level? We want to get a stock check, and this is something that actually a few people mentioned to us that they do because of this issue with capacity, and they say, okay, we don't collect very much day to day, but once a year we'll do a survey of all of our members to find some stuff out. But we're still not really sure if it's capturing everything that we want, or we don't really do anything with it afterwards, but we think that we ought to, and so that's what we've always done. And so we did hear that people are doing these annual stock checks, but we want to help make them as helpful as possible. And so, what are the kind of headline goals for this annual look at things? I think we want to ask bigger questions that get us to longer term trends. So, what is different from this point in this year to this point last year? And then also, what has surprised us, what we've learned, but also looking forward, what can we expect the year ahead to be like, maybe? And I've got a little example for you here, which isn't so much of an internal facing stock check, but I think has many of the lessons that we want to get across to you when we're looking annually. And so we partner with an organisation called Climate Emergency UK on something called the Climate Action Scorecards. And this isn't quite yearly, it's sort of on a 2 year or 18-month cycle, but it is a stock check, a scorecard that looks at every council across the UK and their climate action. And it asks 93 questions of each council. And those questions are answered by volunteers doing research from freedom of information requests and from nationally available data that then gets broken down by council. And so there's different entry points into this, but the point is that at the point that the scorecards are published, there's some key criteria that are used and that can compare across all of these councils and provides a kind of line in the sand for what is happening. It shows what good looks like, what we want councils to be doing, and then how close councils are getting to that. And we, along with Climate Emergency UK, work quite hard not to tweak the methodology too much between different sessions of the scorecards, different cycles of the scorecards, so that as well as that line in the sand comparison at one time, each year can be fairly compared as well, and so we can see how progress is changing. So I think this is nice because it's that sense of like choosing a bit of a methodology, choosing the questions that are important to you and that what you think good looks like. And then finding a kind of methodology of asking those questions. And so for the scorecards, as I say, it's some FOI, some national data, and some volunteer research. And it's a huge effort and it involves hundreds of people who all collaborate. But there's probably a version of this that works for you where you can actually draw in some other people to help collaborate, combine different bits of data sets, but it provides that kind of line in the sand and area where you can say, okay, this is the truth of what is happening right now, and compare it with before, and have something to compare with in the future. Zarina, you also work on obviously the scorecards project. Anything you wanted to add on this, or
Yeah, I
what do you
think
think the
what
value is?
what makes it interesting is that it's a bit different to what we're talking about here with sort of annual reports, but it's an interesting kind of thought experiment as to what something like this could look like in the kind of youth sector and youth space. And it gets input, as Julia says, from lots of volunteers who will help Climate Emergency to score all the councils and gather all this data. But it also gets input from the councils themselves, and their climate officers will log in and double check the answers. And it's useful to both of those groups too. It's useful to the councils themselves to see how they rank against others, what they're doing, what they're not doing, but others like them are. And lots of them learn from each other as to ways that, I don't know, they look for how other councils are heating their swimming pools in a sustainable way or whatever. And they can find those through the scorecards. But it's also useful outside of the group to campaigners or local residents when they're preparing to talk to their councillor about climate action or whatever. So it's just quite a nice example of how collecting this kind of data, in this case, it's on a massive scale, but each individual council, it's not a huge amount of effort to collect that data for each one. And it's useful more than just to those individual councils. It's useful to other councils and it's useful to like the wider world as well. So it's kind of helping the entire kind of sector, as it were, sort of judge how they're doing and where they need to go next, and be able to make cases a bit like your organisations maybe do to funders, and being able to make financial case for, well, other councils like ours have got better funding and they're able to do this. Maybe we could do something similar. That kind of argument gets supported by having some sort of comparative shared data like that, which is quite nice. And that all starts, you can either collect it on an ongoing basis, or in this case, that would just be impossible. So having a nice regular cadence to it, seems to work in this case.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks so much. And we are going to talk obviously about more kind of data sharing as we go through. Um, Another example here then that is more of a kind of annual stock check comes from Girl Guiding, who do a girls' attitude survey every year, and they make this nice kind of infographic and a report to go with it. And so they've got something quite specific. Obviously, Girl Guiding covers all sorts of activities, but this girls' attitude survey is really looking at the kind of thoughts and well-being of the people that they work with. And yeah, they've been running it for a long time now. And so it helps them understand how girls' lives are changing, and the world is changing around us. And so they've built a really trusted evidence base that they can come back to. And are seen as kind of leaders in this area because they have this great rich resource here. So yeah, something to think about here is what might the key questions for you look like in this sort of thing. And so yeah, here are some obviously relevant things to their work, but what it might be for you at that annual level. And so some examples here are we have this slide we've got about young people, and the next slide is about your organizations and communities. So it's just some prompts here. How their aspirations are changing if they're a young person over time. That might be something that's really important to you if that's an area that you're trying to help them with. Their general well-being, sense of belonging in the community, particularly if you have lots of experience of migration and that kind of thing, helping people feel at home. Education and employment, obviously key to some funders. What changes and circumstances generally are going on for your young people. And then confidence and skills is also, yeah, a classic one. And again, we're looking at these things at an annual level because they're not things that we might change every week or all of the time. And also, it might be something that people don't feel comfortable or confident answering very regularly. Like, why are you still asking me this? But if you can sort of set it in that picture of we're trying to get broad demographic changes here. None of this will get attributed back to you personally. We're asking you these things to help us get a sense of our community, of the impact that we're having, and the work that we're doing, and if it's making a difference. So yeah, I think the annual approach helps you ask those bigger questions in a more thoughtful and like proportionate kind of way. So those were looking more at young people, but then more broadly thinking about your organisation and the communities you work in. What are your volunteer experiences? That might be something you want to look at an annual level. How are your partnerships developing? What is a good partnership and a bad partnership? We've done a few different partnerships at my society, and it is that kind of more zoomed out level helps us understand and plan for more successful partnerships in the future. Thinking about who we aren't reaching, as well as who we are. Are there any particular issues emerging amongst young people, or about your community more generally? Obviously AI is one, that obviously people are talking about a lot, but there may be other broader demographic changes. Are the local needs changing? And also new opportunities that might be able to take advantage of. New Prime Minister since we last met together, and so maybe there are new things on the horizon for all of us. So these are, yeah, questions that you might want to ask, or areas that you might want to explore with your community. I know this isn't always easy, but we do have a little chat activity next, thinking about if there's something that you currently don't know about your young people, your volunteers, your users of any kind, or your community, what would it be? And if you'd be willing to put that in the chat, then maybe together we could talk about the kinds of questions that you might ask to kind of get that information. Because I know that these things aren't always straightforward, and saying, we want to know why people aren't coming on the bus anymore. It might not be easy to find that out, but maybe together we can have a think about these things. So yeah, is there something that you don't know about your users or community that you would like to know? I'll just give people a minute or two to think about that. Um,
And maybe while people are writing or thinking, I'll sort of mention we're going to talk a little bit later about how you can use both kind of stories and more specific data and combine them. But you can use them both together and you can make more specific data out of broader stories. So I know a lot of the information when we were interviewing lots of organizations like yours, some of them are on the call, about how what sort of data they currently collect. Lots of it is kind of case notes and sort of survey feedback and whatever that are often just kind of fairly open stories. And it can be a lot of work to try and extract data out of those constantly throughout the year. But maybe it's the kind of situation where once you've got those stories, there might be ways you can summarize them or extract data out of them at least once a year. And then you get both the kind of headline numbers that you can report on and like then this sort of wealth of kind of qualitative uh kind of storytelling narrative to evidence it and go alongside it. um but yeah, kind of interested to know what, or maybe you all know absolutely
Yeah,
everything
maybe you feel like you
about
know
all of
too
your
much
young
about all of
people and
your
your
users and
volunteers
what's going on with them. We can
because
come
you are
back to
right on
this.
the front line.
Yeah. Volunteers, yeah, how much work do you actually want to commit to? Absolutely.
Mm.
Staff member, or do you want your own job description so you know what's expected of you? Vanessa, that is so interesting. Yeah, in different organizations I've worked with and worked in and volunteered with myself, I think that there are real ranges to that and people come to it at different points. Um, and yeah, and people do operate differently. I wonder. I think maybe there's like a, in an intake survey or when you're recruiting volunteers, you can find out, how much they expect or what their kind of yeah, expectations are. But then it is worth to like check in after a few weeks and say like, does this actually match up with your real life? Have you been over ambitious about what you can do, kind of thing? Yeah, people are complicated, aren't they? And so it is a hard one. Um Zarina. Oh, sorry, this might not be you, Zarina.
Yeah,
This might
it's
be
not
someone who
really
joined you.
me, it's
Sorry,
someone who
yeah.
joined.
My bad. I sent the wrong link out to everybody. Um, we want to know what young people think the best format for giving feedback is. Are there methods beyond surveying they prefer? That's so interesting. Yeah, we talked a little bit last time about that your case notes and that your, the sort of things that your staff and volunteers write up is data that counts as well. But what engaging ways are there to ask for feedback? I have a close friend who works with young people in the Yorkshire Dales, and she had an activity at the end. I'm gonna forget the details now, but rather than filling in a survey, it was like very tactile that involved like putting stones in different places or like sliding stones up a scale, even small things like that that they then at the end then you'd take a picture of and kind of have a more visual representation. And so I wonder if there is some thinking to be doing about that, about like creative ways, as long as you can like still capture it, that match up with the activity you're doing. Yeah, or there's like putting feathers in a different kind of bucket. I'm not getting it quite right there. Cool wall with the scouts. Slapping their answer on the wall on post-its. Oh, nice. Yeah. Anything that involves like a bit of movement. And yeah, I think also when we try and do feedback as a team, it can be helpful to do that combination of like have 5 minutes by yourself to think about what you think and then talk to the person next to you and then in bigger groups and that sort of thing. Because some people feel really confident saying, my feeling is this and I did enjoy this and I didn't enjoy this in a room of people, but other people, really don't. And want to talk through it with somebody first. Or, just want a bit more like added safety in that kind of process. Or don't know what they think until someone says, I think this, and then you think, oh no, I don't think that actually, what I think is something else. Um, so yeah, really helpful. Um, Maybe we have a few resources in the two-pager that's going out, but I'll try and think of some more and send out afterwards some of those resources about engaging ways to ask questions for young people and to get kind of methods wise. Um, Great. So yeah, again, we're doing hear a bit of a mixture of like our collection, data collection at that annual level, as well as then the reporting. And we're going to move on to a bit more about reporting in a minute. But again, just that kind of review process, we talked about that kind of cycle last time of first you have to collect your data and then you have to kind of bring it together. And then it's about asking questions and analyzing that data and then doing something as a result. And so the sorts of questions that we might want to ask at a year-long level are about what's changed, what surprised us, what has worked well, what didn't work well, and what questions do we have. And these are maybe more internal facing to begin with, but they will help you form what becomes more external. Um, and so, yeah, again, we're about halfway through the year now in July, and maybe this was a good time to do like a halfway point and think with your team about what is going well and what isn't. I noticed quite a lot of people said that they don't do kind of project reviews when we did our poll at the start, and I think that can be a nice way to kind of touch base with things. But when you're busy, it is hard to do that. And so maybe it's not about doing it per project, but about doing checks in, check-ins every so often. We have an in-person team meeting every quarter, and that's our point where we give kind of verbal updates on our projects and how they're all going, the different team members. And I think that helps us as a kind of reminder and a check-in point. So maybe there are options there. Just coming back to the chat. More community focus after COVID, previously being more youth. So definitely need to work with community more about what future activities they want developing. Yeah, that is really helpful, David. Thank you. It can come back to that very first stage of the kind of development of the services and of the activities. Um, and yeah, doing that in collaboration with the community and then with the funding available is hard, isn't it? Making sure they line up. Um, yeah, would be really interested to hear in the chat if anyone's got any good approaches to that.
And
Um,
I wonder as well whether that maybe I don't know whether it complicate things or help matters, but taking a bit of a view of like what is already available in your area as well, like because each of your organizations isn't kind of acting in isolation. And mostly we've so far talked about sort of what that whether there are any metrics or anything, any stories coming out of your community, your users, your organization, your volunteers. But there's also a bit of a view of like what else is happening nearby and what services are available to young people. Are you in a hot spot or a cold spot for particular things? And maybe that might have an effect on, as David says, like what kind of activities or support or whatever young people need in your area. And that can again be a thing that's quite difficult to keep on top of regularly, especially as things it's happening outside your organization and it's like things happen slowly and you don't notice and whatever, but maybe a sort of annual or 2 yearly kind of update of like, so what else is available? Who are we not quite competing against, but like what are the other draws on people's time or what are the other support services that have disappeared that maybe you now need to take up and make a funding case for like that annual kind of that could factor into a stock check like that too.
Absolutely. And encouraging all people across your team to do that, like noticing work and, and reminding them that that those kind of like day-to-day interactions or little themes that they're picking up on are valuable and those probably are telling you something about the broader trends. So yeah, I think information at all of those levels kind of thing. Great. We're going to get a bit more practical now and thinking about this annual report because it's something that most people or most organizations do produce, and it's something that we think, if you make a good one, can go to all of your different stakeholders. In fact, very much this week and today, Zarina and I both had calendar invites from our colleague Myth, who's been in charge of getting our annual report out there to schedule our emails of who from our contacts we have to send ours to. And so, yeah, a good annual report isn't just a load of work from a kind of compliance and charity perspective, but is this document of all of the things that you've achieved that can go to lots of different people and to have lots of uses. So I think just keeping it simple to start with. What do people want to know, and what are the key things that you might want to include in an annual report? I think that they can feel intimidating, but they don't have to be. Think of them as telling the story of your year and what's happened. The audience that I guess we're looking at are funders, trustees, partners, maybe even counselors and other people who have engaged with your work, and of course your users and other people. Um, if someone only read 10 pages about your work, what would you want them to know and what would matter? Ours, my society, there's about 30 people who work at my society. It's quite long, and there's lots of information in it. But according to you and your organization, you have to think about what goes in there and what formats you want. A good summary page is worth its weight in gold, or an infographic kind of thing, really helps too. But the key things that we want people to know are what it is that you set out to achieve at the start of the year, who you worked with, what changed as a result, how you used your funding, and then what your plans for the future are. And these can come in different formats. Lots obviously start with an introduction from Chair of Trustees and from your Chief Exec. Ours certainly does. And then it gets into the nitty-gritty of the different things that we have worked on. And it's hopefully fairly easy to navigate depending on what you're interested in. We will actually show you ours a little bit later on in the session. Great. So, next thinking about, yeah, the kind of ingredients that we want in our annual report, possibly a clear summary of your year and what you got up to and key numbers, I think really helps give people the big picture, especially if they're, not going to read through the whole thing. I do think that stories are what brings these things to life. And so where you can have quotes and examples from people, I think that that is so powerful. Numbers show your reach and demonstrate scale and consistency. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we bring stories and numbers together. Um, where appropriate, I do think being honest about reflections on challenges and how you overcame them is really interesting. I'm going to show you in a second, have a little section in our annual report all about a conference that we run called TICTeC, which is the impacts of civic technology. And for that conference, the funding part of it did used to come from an American fund, the National Endowment for Democracy, that when Trump was originally re-elected, it all got frozen and we thought we couldn't run the conference. And then we had to kind of run around and try and find different bits of money. And it all came together in the end. But I think telling that story and, being honest about those things is helpful for our partners and people to understand, how things happened and why they happened the way they did. And then also beyond that, plans for the year ahead and what the direction of travel is. And so those are the sorts of things that we like to see in an annual report. So here are some pages from our annual report, which I think is actually only going out to partners and things this week, and then it's going live next week. Um, but I wanted to show you a few things here. We try and take a friendly kind of tone and friendly and colourful and that sort of thing. I don't like the picture on the front because I think I look silly in it, but it is a nice picture of people looking happy in the whole. And then there's just two pages here I've drawn out which are about TICTeC, which is, yes, this conference I told you about. And I think this is a nice combination of, this isn't all of the information about TICTeC on there, but it's a couple of the pages. We've, on that second, in the middle page, you can see got some kind of quotes about people about how much they enjoyed TICTeC. And then on this next page, TICTeC in numbers. And so how many people came, the presenters from the Global South, that's an important metric for us. People making connections. And then it's always nice to say 100% of people said that they liked it or 100% of people would recommend it. And so it is nice that we get to say that. So yes, that's one way that we try and bring these things together. And I'm sure in your sessions you have that too. And so you might have the number of people who attended a certain kind of class or event, or who stepped foot in the building, and then some key quotes from those people about what they got out of being in the building, and trying to combine those things together. So yeah, maybe I think let's keep going, but maybe towards the end and so I have to close my tabs and I'll share the link in case people want to have a look afterwards. But yes, I think also, yeah, being able to navigate around between the different sections is helpful, and so we'll come back to the details on that later. Again, getting into this kind of numbers and stories thing, I think we want numbers to tell us, yeah, things like how many people attended or were engaged, who they were, how often they came, and yeah, what changed. And so those kind of core quantitative things, and then qualitatively the stories, why it mattered, what changed, how people felt, and what we learned. And I think both of these can be memorable for people. And so it is often a story that sticks with me about something, but then, the numbers demonstrate the kind of the scale of that impact. And so I think bringing them together where possible is the key. And so then, yeah, the framework I think that works really nicely for reports, presentations, funding bids, trustee papers, whatever you might like, on a bigger scale or on a smaller scale, is first setting the kind of scene with some numbers and what happened, and then kind of digging in a bit more deeper to those stories and fleshing that out more in a human angle, and then thinking about what you're going to do with that. And so what comes next, what was the result of that, or what changed, or how you'll impact it moving forward. Could, of course, be the other way round, where you tell a story about someone in just an individual or small scale, and then you flesh that out and build a bigger picture around it. But I do think that we want that combination and then to take it somewhere with the reflection or with the next steps. And I have a nice example for you next, which is Junior Parkrun. I think that they do a good job of that. And they do a kind of annual survey quite similar to the girl guiding one I mentioned earlier, and then they kind of write it up. And not only did they write theirs up as a bit of a report, but they then got some good media coverage out of it, which I think is really nice. And so they want to understand the impact of their work, obviously. They asked fairly simple questions about the young people who were coming along. Um, and they demonstrated the benefits beyond just the physical activity that, the young people were getting a lot out of it. And this press release got good media coverage. And so I think you can see this is the press release here. There's a nice picture here, without identifying too many people, which is obviously key. And then they have this great statistic. 85% of parents and caregivers told us that Junior Parkrun had had a positive sense on their child's sense of self-esteem, which is a really nice statistic. And then they have an individual personal story about somebody here. Their son has speech and language disorder and struggles with group sports, but Junior Parkrun works really well for them. So I think that's a really nice combination of that overall impact. This many people on the whole, on that like bigger scale, benefit from this. And here is a specific example of how somebody benefits, along with a nice picture that helps. So I think that's a nice example for us to learn from. And when it comes to like having these examples, one really practical tip here for you is not to wait till report writing season and scurry around and being like, anyone do anything good recently? Because I know I've been there saying, anyone say anything nice? Scrolling through your emails, going through things, trying to see like who said something nice about you. Um, but where these do come out, it's worth saving them at the time. So sorry, it's small, but at my society we use Slack as our kind of internal messaging, and we have a channel per kind of team for impact notes, is what we call it. And so these are when people tell us something good or we would be able to use for this kind of setting in the future. It instantly goes in there, and then we have access to it when it comes to writing a report and saying, oh yeah, so and so did say that at this time. So yes, things like quotes, photos, feedback, and just good examples things, because it's really not encouraging on a day-to-day level to see these things, and it makes them easier to find later on. So yes, just a simple habit. It doesn't have to be Slack for you if that's not your kind of team's way of operating. It might be a folder within your drive or within your shared space, but I do think it helps in that workflow of writing it. Great. Naomi's got a question. Would you recommend stories generally be short like that Junior Parkrun example? Yeah, great question, Naomi. I think it does depend on the situation a bit. I do like if you can get across the like impact in a sentence, amazing, because then people have short attention spans, and I think that that is really powerful. Especially maybe if it is part of a press release where you might want a few different angles in there so that people can have something different to pick up depending on what they're looking for. But then if it's a really complex kind of scenario where something's really changed over time, you're following the case of one young person or a family over a year, and various things have happened to them, then I think, feel free to tell that in detail, and maybe just bring out one quote at the top to kind of to highlight that. What would you say on that one, Zarina?
Yeah, I was going to say that we do that sometimes with case studies of how people have used our services, which are fairly difficult for us to collect as a remote kind of digital charity. But when we can, often we'll have a couple of questions that we ask people. They sort of write their answers about it, or we sort of interview them or whatever. Get a fairly long-ish kind of case study, and you can always from that pull out the individual real highlights, and those could become social media posts, or those could be kind of pull quotes in your annual report. But then you've always got the longer thing to go back to. Obviously, it depends. Do you have the time, and do the people who are giving you the stories have the time to write up something longer for you and provide something longer? If they do, then that's great because you can obviously make both long and short stuff from that. But even if all you can gather is a couple of snippets of how your organization has helped a particular person, I think that balanced against some of the numbers that you're collecting can sort of still enrich it, even without it being someone's life story. Um, and a thought that came into my mind while we're talking about like not waiting until report writing season. Obviously, one of the things we heard from your organizations is lots of you are already collecting data as part of your day to day. So people checking in for sessions or registration forms or whatever. So there might be little pots of information that are being recorded within your organization already that you can sort of then just wrap up, summarize at the end of the year, or tally up how many people have done a particular thing. So yeah, there's also collecting both these kind of qualitative notes and photos and whatever, but there's probably also some kind of more numeric data that you might already be collecting, and it will just be down to finding out what that is, and it might also influence your choices about what tools to use in the future as to whether they kind of expose that data to you in a way that you can use.
Yeah, that's true. We talked a bit about that last time, didn't we? That you don't really want a black box system, which is like you put it all into it and you can't get anything out at the end. And so you do. I think it's at these times of year where you realize, oh, I wish we did have a statistic about this, and then that might help you next year round. One final thing to say on this is I think it is if you're able, if you're willing to, being a bit shameless about some of these things. I went to an event recently where I was part of a panel of speakers, or lots of different people were speaking, and had a 1 hour session. And at the start, the person organising the event said, "My society are thought leaders in this area, and we are so grateful to have them here," and yada 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 about how great we were. And I said, really did say afterwards, like, that was so such a kind introduction. Would you put that in an email and like write it down so that we could use it there, somewhere else? Because sometimes people say things out loud that you really want written down so that you can put it there somewhere. And so, even if it's a bit awkward, I say, write it down. Um, Great. And then yeah, thinking about who needs to hear the story. This is another one, as I mentioned, we've been strong-armed by our comms officer, rightly so, about making sure that people actually read the impact report and receive it, and specifically that they get an email from the person that they know at My Society saying, "Hi, it was lovely to work with you on this. Here's our impact report. It mentions the work that we've done together and all of the other stuff that we've been up to. We'd love you to have a look at it, and just thanks for all of the help and support this year." And I think that that is kind of the point of this whole thing. We don't want to put this into a place which nobody reads. But yes, the people that we do want to send it to are funders and trustees, obviously, but then our partners, local schools, local authorities, our supporters, maybe even, and we're going to talk about this more next session, your local authority, your local councillors from your ward, your MP, people like that, and people who should have a stake in your organisation and what you do, but might not know what you're up to day to day. Perfect thing to send them is your impact or your annual report so that they can see what you're up to, you've achieved, and it's full of sort of things that they can use in their work too to kind of advocate for you. And so making up that list, and I know it's a lot of work to pull the report together in the first place, but it's kind of just as important of thinking about where it goes. Yeah. The other thing to say, obviously, is in the part of pulling together that annual report, and I do think it's important to share the annual report in full with people. Will also be sections of it that you might be able to pull out and reuse in different cases, with different audiences. And so, yes, it becomes an annual report, but there are parts of it that may go to your trustee paper or different funding applications you can use in your website and social media. Have conversations with. If you've got young people or people who are willing to be behind the camera on the team, can you make a video explaining some of it for, the short form video sites or that sort of thing? The content is brilliant beyond its use in that kind of long booklet there. We've got one of those videos coming out next week, as I understand it, to kind of try and help promote ours. So yeah, just loads of really important stuff in there to use, both on that internal decision-making level and in your communications about what it is that you do. Great. So we're going to move on now. We're making really good progress about kind of sharing data more generally. And so the annual report, as we've mentioned, is this big document. But at my society, we're really interested in data sharing and a healthy information environment to help us all kind of work better. Um, and I'll just see if there's something in the chat. Examples of how to use the annual report's content. Maybe I'll send those around afterwards. I think it's thinking about pulling out the relevant bits to different stakeholders, as I say, if there are, some that are more relevant to others. And yeah, social media, especially if you think, oh, we've got this great case study or something that came up for annual report or that we've drawn together for the annual report, but we haven't told anyone else about it anywhere else. Is there, even if it's just an Instagram carousel, key highlights from our annual report, that you can pull out that way. Zarino, anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It'll depend on your organization, what sort of networks you have, what sort of people are interested in what you're working on and where they are, how to kind of reach them. It could also be a thing that is nice to feed back to the young people who use your services because many of them probably won't even think about this this kind of stuff. They won't even realize the scale of what you do, and it shows that you really do care about them, which you all do. So there's also like a sort of internal sharing back to reflecting your organization back to itself and to your service users too.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. Great. And so yeah, getting into sharing data, a really key example here is 360 Giving. They are a funding platform where it records where funders have spent their money. And it's really interesting for us as an organization to see where money goes. But they created a common standard for publishing this data, and it's now really well used. It's got millions of grants information on there, search and analyze. If you're just getting started to find out how to write a funding application, what sort of thing funders need, specific funders and what they go for, the kinds of information that they ask for. It is this really valuable data set that works for everyone. And originally people were nervous to share this stuff because they were like, funding, it's so competitive. We couldn't possibly share, what we said that we would do kind of thing. But or from the kind of hidden world of funders. But actually, it's really powerful, and the fact that it's shared information from everyone takes the kind of individual vulnerability out of it, I think. And yeah, really creates value for everyone, and is kind of the spirit in which we want to approach this. I'll just see if there's anything else in the chat. Oh yeah, the Beavers, Cubs, and Scouts attending the AGM. I love that. That's really important. Great. And yeah, so this idea of getting information together, which might in isolation not be that interesting or important, but together really important. We had an in-person event yesterday and somebody mentioned a kind of trend spotting thing there where it was domestic violence charities who 20 organizations had each shared that they'd noticed this one small trend emerging. And for them, it wasn't quite a big enough signal to act or anything, but because they heard it from 20 different organizations at a kind of sector level, they realized this was a really important thing to happening. I think it was to do with mobile phone technology data tracking. And so then they could act on it at a sector level. And so it is those things that, like, in combination are, bring to light different, bring to light how important something is. And there's another nice example here, a kind of global project, this one actually, Mozilla Common Voice, which is a speech recognition kind of software sharing platform. And they found that different speech recognition systems weren't performing well because they'd been trained on really basic data sets that weren't reflecting the like diversity and the real languages of some lesser used languages around the world. And so they invited volunteers to contribute these short voice recordings, and then they had a consistent kind of quite techie process to help validate each other's voice recordings as well. And so it was a kind of crowdsourcing, but it was also validation. And that is how Common Voice started, or grew, which now has 250 languages that are much more realistic to people's real spoken voice, thanks to all of this work from volunteers and to people to process that data together. And so again, yeah, it takes the kind of bringing together of people to do that, and yeah, the small piece of information become much more valuable when there's a set way of contributing them and like a process that then gives them meaning, and validates them. So yeah, a really nice one. But we're now going to get into the kind of work that we've been doing. So, But this started from a website that we built called the Local Intelligence Hub, which is aimed at climate organisations. And we have lots of climate data on there that is broken down at a constituency level. You can either look at it as parliamentary constituencies or at council areas. And there's three different views to get at this data. So there's this map view where you can shade the map to see kind of hotspots and cold spots of different information. And so, for example, this could be flood prone areas, or it could be areas with high fuel poverty or high child poverty, things like that. And you can see that on that kind of really visual map view. And then you've got the constituency page. And so this is a Scottish parliamentary constituency, which has some information about the MP and then polling opinion and public opinion as that kind of deep dive into the area. And then there's the table view, and that is a kind of spreadsheet type view where you can really compare things as numbers and like dig into the details, decide what columns you want in there, decide what information you want in there, and as well as seeing it on the website, you can export it as CSV and combine it with your own data and do whatever you like with it. And we built this in partnership with an organisation called the Climate Coalition, which has hundreds of small climate organisations as members who each contribute bits of data to try and populate this. We wished they contributed more data, but it has been really nice to kind of bring some information to life. But at this point, I'm going to pass on to Zarina, who can tell us more about local intelligence hub if you'd like to, but also
Yeah.
tell us about a new version we've been building that we hope will be more useful for youth organisations.
Hopefully, yes. There we go.
Oh, sorry, I need to stop my share.
Hopefully you can see that now, right?
Yes.
Amazing. So yeah, this is basically the local intelligence hub that Julie was just mentioning. I thought it would be worth showing you some of the data that some of their members have already shared with us. So things like a number of meetings that the Climate Coalition, who's the sort of organising body for this site, have held over the years. Numbers of activists or financial supporters or whatever that some of the organisations originally were a little bit skeptical about sharing this, like being able to say where our supporters are or where our members are. But actually, it's been very useful for the organisations to see some of each, like even at this very, very high level, like you're not sharing where individual supporters actually live, but just a rough number of if I wanted to go into this area and run an event with other organizations like me, like who are the organizations that have that support on the ground, for instance? Like that's their kind of lots of this site's use cases around that kind of community organizing angle, which yeah, this kind of data really helps with to get an idea of where is the movement strong or weak in different areas, who else is active in this place that I could work with, or talk to, or share stories at the pub with about all the challenges we're similarly facing. But yeah, we were kind of interested in this idea of are there ways once you've collected your data annually, let's say, like could you share it with other organizations? Is there some level of this that you would find useful if other organizations shared? And so just as a very quick example, we sort of threw together a version of the local intelligence hub, which we'd built with the Climate Coalition, but not for the climate sector, for the youth sector instead. And we called it the Youth Data Hub for now. And there's a you can check it out. I'll just post a link in the chat in case anybody wants to poke around it. We can obviously share a link afterwards as well. But it's not a real site, sort of. Well, there's real data in there, some, and it's a little bit out of date. I must admit, I haven't updated it with the latest MPs' positions and like the cabinet officers and stuff that all happened yesterday, was it, or the day before? Things are moving very quickly at the moment in the world of MPs, so I haven't updated that. But generally, the idea with this site is that we wanted to allow a a whole kind of sector in the original case, the climate and nature kind of sector, but maybe in this case, the youth services sector, to be able to look up what's happening locally to them. How does that compare to what's happening near them or nationally, and to be able to use it for both their kind of internal strategy setting, but also some of their outreach, either to other organisations like theirs or their potential members or their funders or their elected representatives, as we'll talk about in the next session. So yeah, without further ado, you can sort of search by a particular location or an MP or whatever, a particular council name or a postcode. I'm just going to use my location at the moment. I'm actually in Liverpool, unusually. I don't live here, but I'm visiting somebody. And so you can see either your council or your constituency in this case. Different sectors might be interested in different things. I'd be kind of interested to know whether your organizations tend to think at a council level or at more of a regional level or like at the kind of parliamentary constituency level. Um, in this case, the climate sector tends to talk a lot to MPs because they're trying to influence national decision making. Um, and so, if you looked at a constituency, we've obviously got some information in there about the MP. We've pulled in some data, demographic data, things like child poverty, um, pupil teacher ratios, deprivation, um, all sorts of demographic data in there, and you can actually click through and see more of it, which turns into a bit of a pile up of all these different bits of data that we've collected. But for each one, we obviously link through to the original source in case anybody wants to reference anything. Um, and there might be data in there that helps you work out what your area is like that other nearby areas aren't, or whether there are particular demographics within your area that you are or aren't addressing, maybe. And we also pull in, where we can, some public opinion data. We actually have some of this at a county level. I'll show you that in a second. And some data about what's happening at a local level in this case constituency, which is a fairly small area. So the number of local authority youth spaces or leisure facilities, or once you click on it, we actually show a lot more. So things like the local groups and beavers groups and stuff like that within the areas. Because one of the things we found with the climate sector was you often had some really passionate, enthusiastic volunteers who care about a particular part of the bigger picture of climate and nature. So they might be the RSPB volunteers that run the nature reserve in a particular place. And they might not know that there are other organisations nearby that equally care about climate and nature like they do. So maybe they have never met the women's institutes that are in their area or the CAFOD nature emergency churches or whatever. There's loads of other types of organisations that might be operating in your space that you haven't found yet. So that's one way we've seen people using it within the climate sector, is to even just identify or to reassure themselves that they already know all these groups and organisations that are acting near them. But by those organisations either sharing the fact that they exist and sharing their data, or by them being included in like national, in this case, we've imported some data from YouthWork One, which is a big survey that covers the whole of the UK. That's kind of increased that visibility and help people get in touch with each other potentially. I'll show an example actually at the oh, what did I just do? I'll pop Liverpool in and show the local authority level just as an idea. So there's slightly more information in here at the council level. So we've pulled in some of the data that Sport England collects, which is really cool, around children's activity. Maybe if you're a sporty activity kind of organisation, it's useful to be able to pull in data like that. Or there's also some amazing data we found from Sport England about young people's attitudes, their trust in others, their age, whether they're happy, that kind of stuff, which again is very high level. It's only kind of it's useful to sprinkle into those kinds of funding applications, maybe, or to be able to pull together that plus some of the work you're doing and how your work is addressing that. And then that's kind of justifying some of the work you do, or maybe explaining why some of your programs are more effective than others. So yeah, that's kind of the rough idea of what something like this could do. And obviously, this thing doesn't properly exist yet. I just wanted to kind of use it as a bit of a conversation starter, really, to see like, do if something like this did exist, would you find it useful? Would you share any data to it? Like, are there things that would make you hesitant about that? I don't know. But yeah, it would be. I'll hand back over to Julia because I think those are the questions you were going to ask. I've just taken the
It's
words
true,
right
but
out of
as
your
we know,
mouth.
I don't agree with you saying it doesn't properly exist yet, because we're all looking at this
It does
amazing thing
exist.
that you've built, and so it does exist. Um, Great. Yeah. One thing I wanted to flag that you haven't specifically said, but people I think can see, one thing that I love about these sites that we make is that we give you your area's statistic and then directly underneath it, the national average. So you can make that case to say that something is higher here, lower here, and that's why you need to give us the money in this area to do it. And so I think that that's really helpful. I'm glad to see people in the chat saying that as well. Yeah, exactly. Oh, thanks so much for saying. We don't have loads of time, but we have got a little survey that I'm sending around afterwards where we'd love your feedback on this. We can try and hunt around for some more national data sets where they're available. If you know of any that you go to that we can build in, that's really helpful to find out. Or if there's stuff that you'd like to share. Again, the helpful for us here is comparable statistics, and so we wonder if everybody is collecting something about numbers of people or how people get there, or if you're having to collect the same thing for a report, then if we can get it in there, then it helps people, and that's amazing. But yeah, please do click around. There is the map view, as Serena showed. There's parliamentary constituencies and councils. If anybody wants to put anything, it's nice to see the comments in the chat. But yeah, if you do have any immediate thoughts, please do put them in there or unmute in the 2 minutes we've got. Otherwise, we'll see you in kind of 2 weeks' time. The key things, yeah, we want to know are what information do you regularly look for and come to, and can we get that in one place for you? So information you already use and or look for, and then what could you share as an organisation or would be willing to share and kind of help build this better picture up together. Yes, I will send that out in the email that I follow up afterwards. So yes, you'll get the Zoom session. I'll resend the recording from last time. I'll send this recording and I'll send the Zoom session link for next time. I'll send you the right one as well. And yeah, it's been so nice to talk to you all. All specific areas. Yeah, I mean, there's maybe a really detailed version of this where we get into wards, Serena, which might be useful for people here. But
Yeah.
we need to do some thinking about that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what sort of areas you care about. We'd been talking to another coalition that works with women and girls, violence against women and girls, and they're obviously very interested in like policing areas. We've talked to other organisations that tend to work at like a sort of national health trust and hospital area kind of